There is a moment in every life when you realize something uncomfortable. Nobody is coming to save you. No one is arriving with perfect timing, perfect advice, or perfect support to pull you out of where you are. And strangely, that realization is not depressing. It's liberating. Because the moment you stop waiting, you start winning. Right now, somewhere deep inside you, there is a quiet voice that already knows this. It knows that you were not meant to live distracted, diluted, half-committed. It knows you were built for more focus, more discipline, more strength than you've been using. And this audiobook exists to wake that chapter of you up. Welcome to You Are Going to Win. This is not a hype speech. This is a long walk back to yourself. In this audiobook, you are going to learn how to focus on you until you win. Not until it feels good, not until it's easy, not until people understand you, but until the results speak for you. Because winning is not about luck. Winning is about attention. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Most people lose not because they aren't capable, but because their focus is scattered. They watch others instead of building themselves. They explain instead of executing. They wait for confidence instead of earning it. And day by day, that scattered focus compounds into regret. This audiobook is your reset. Over the next chapters, we will walk through why focusing on yourself is not selfish. It's survival. How discipline quietly outperforms motivation. Why isolation is sometimes the price of elevation. How to keep moving when no one claps for you. And how to stay locked in long enough for life to finally change. But first, you need to hear this clearly. You do not lose because life is unfair. You lose when you stop believing that your actions still matter. And as long as you're breathing, your actions still matter. Now pause for a moment. Think about how much energy you've spent watching other people's lives, their progress, their opinions, their timelines, and ask yourself honestly, what would happen if you redirected that same energy toward becoming dangerous with your focus? Not loud, not flashy, dangerous. Because focus, applied daily, turns ordinary people into unstoppable forces. Most people want results without isolation. They want growth without discomfort. They want transformation without changing habits. But winning doesn't work like that. Winning demands priority. And priority means something else has to lose. Distractions lose, excuses lose, old identities lose, so that the future version of you can win. Now understand this. Focusing on you does not mean ignoring the world forever. It means temporarily removing noise so you can build something solid. It means choosing progress over approval. It means deciding that your life is too important to be lived on autopilot. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. The season where you focus on you is the season where people misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're obsessed. Let them. Because the same people will call you lucky later. They won't see the early mornings. They won't feel the discipline. They won't know the internal battles you won quietly. But results don't need witnesses. They need consistency. Now let me ask you something. Are you tired of starting over? Tired of feeling like you have potential but no proof? Tired of knowing you could be more disciplined, more focused, more dangerous with your time? Good. That frustration is fuel, because people who are comfortable don't change. People who are uncomfortable do, and discomfort, when directed properly, becomes momentum. This audiobook is not here to make you feel better for an hour. It's here to make you stronger for a lifetime. So make a quiet agreement with yourself right now. Not an emotional one, a serious one. For the next stretch of your life, however long it takes, you will focus on you until you win. No shortcuts, no validation seeking, no quitting when it gets boring. Because boring discipline beats exciting distraction every time. In the next chapter, we're going to strip this down to the foundation. Why building your strongest self must become a daily, non-negotiable practice. And why missing days costs more than you think. This is where the real work begins. Chapter 2. Focus is the real battle. Most people think the battle is external. They think the enemy is competition, bad luck, unfair circumstances, other people getting ahead. But the real battle has always been internal. It's the fight for focus. Every day your attention is under attack. Notifications, opinions, comparisons, doubts, old habits whispering that tomorrow is soon enough. And every time your focus breaks, momentum dies quietly, not dramatically, quietly. That's why most people don't notice they're losing until years have passed. They didn't fail once, they drifted. Winning is not about one heroic decision. It's about who controls your attention most days. Because what you focus on daily becomes what you build. Now let's get honest. If you don't consciously decide what matters, everything will matter. And when everything matters, nothing moves forward. Focus is not about doing more. It's about doing less, deliberately. Winning requires subtraction. You subtract distractions. You subtract unnecessary conversations. You subtract habits that drain energy instead of building it. And most people resist this because subtraction feels lonely. When you focus on you, you step out of the noise. You stop reacting to everything. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing to be seen every day. And that silence scares people, including the old version of you. Because silence forces you to confront yourself, your discipline, your excuses, your consistency. But here's the truth. Silence is where strength is built. While everyone else is consuming, you're creating. While everyone else is watching, you're working. While everyone else is talking, you're training. That's how winning starts. Quietly. Now understand this clearly. Focus is not something you find. It's something you protect. And protection requires boundaries. You don't owe everyone access to your time. You don't owe every message a response. You don't owe every opinion your attention. The moment you realize that, your energy returns. And energy is the currency of winners. Now think about this. Every distracted day costs you compound interest. One unfocused day doesn't feel like much, but 10 become a month becomes a year becomes regret. Focus compresses time. When you're focused, progress accelerates. When you're distracted, effort feels heavy and slow. That's why some people seem to advance faster with less noise. They're not lucky. They're locked in. Now let's talk about comparison. Comparison is one of the greatest focus killers ever invented. When you watch others constantly, you borrow their timeline. You rush. You doubt. You lose patience with your own process. But your journey doesn't need to look impressive. It needs to be effective. Winning doesn't care how it looks on the way. It only cares that you didn't quit. Now here's a principle you need to internalize. You cannot build your future while constantly checking someone else's. Focus on you until you win means exactly that. You put blinders on, not forever, but long enough to build skills, long enough to stack discipline, long enough to create results that don't need explanation. Now pause. Think about how often you break your own focus, not because you're weak, but because you're untrained. Training focus is no different than training your body. It's uncomfortable at first. You crave distraction. You reach for noise. You feel restless. That's withdrawal. And withdrawal is proof that focus is working. Most people run from that discomfort. Winners lean into it, because on the other side of it, clarity shows up. You know what to do. You know what matters. You stop overthinking. Action becomes obvious. Now let me say this plainly. You don't need more motivation. You need fewer distractions. Motivation fades, focus compounds, and compounding focus builds unstoppable momentum. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about discipline. Not the motivational version. The quiet, boring, unglamorous discipline that separates people who talk about winning from people who actually do it. This is where excuses start dying and results start forming. Chapter 3. Discipline is the difference. Motivation is loud. Discipline is quiet. And that's why most people chase one and avoid the other. Motivation feels good. It arrives with emotion. It gives you a surge. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. It shows up when emotion disappears. And winning has never belonged to the most motivated people. It belongs to the most disciplined ones. Now let's clear something up. Discipline is not punishment. It's self-respect in action. It's doing what needs to be done, even when no one is watching, even when nothing feels exciting, even when the results are not visible yet. Most people quit in this phase, not because they're incapable, but because discipline feels lonely. There's no applause, no instant feedback, no proof you're winning yet, just repetition. And repetition exposes character. Now listen carefully. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, something important happens. You build trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. You don't become confident by thinking differently. You become confident by keeping promises to yourself. Small ones, daily ones, unimpressive ones. That's how winners are built. Now think about this. How many times have you told yourself you'd start tomorrow? How many times did tomorrow arrive and nothing changed? That's not laziness, that's broken self-trust. And broken self-trust makes everything feel harder. Discipline repairs that trust. One action at a time. Now let's talk about boredom. Discipline is boring. That's the chapter nobody puts on posters. Winning doesn't look heroic most days. It looks repetitive. It looks like doing the same thing again when you'd rather do something else. Most people quit when boredom shows up. Winners understand boredom is the entry fee. If you can work through boredom, you're already ahead of most people. Because boredom filters out the unserious. Now let's talk about consistency. Consistency beats intensity every time. One intense week won't change your life. 6 consistent months will, but consistency requires restraint. You can't burn hot and disappear. You must show up, even when energy is low. Especially when energy is low. Now let me tell you something important. There will be days where nothing seems to move, no progress, no feedback, no validation. Those days are not wasted. They are conditioning days. They teach you to operate without reward. And operating without reward is a superpower. Because once you don't need encouragement, you become unstoppable. Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, do I only work when I feel like it? Or do I work because it's time? That answer tells you everything. Discipline doesn't negotiate. It doesn't ask how you feel. It asks one question, what's next? And then it executes. Now understand this. You don't need perfect discipline. You need non-negotiable standards. Standards are decisions made in advance. They remove debate. They save energy. When you decide ahead of time what you do no matter what, you stop wasting mental energy convincing yourself. Now think about the habits that would change your life if done daily. Not big things. Small, boring, repeatable actions. Those habits are your edge, and discipline is how you sharpen it. Now let me say this clearly. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your standards. And if your standards are weak, your outcomes will be too. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about something most people misunderstand. Why focusing on yourself often requires walking alone. Why isolation is not a flaw. It's a phase. And why the quiet seasons are often the ones that decide everything. This is where many people turn back, and where winners keep going. Chapter 4. The lonely season. There is a phase no one prepares you for. A phase where you're doing the right things, but it feels like you're moving backwards socially. You're quieter, more selective, less available. And people start to notice. They ask questions, they make comments, they assume things. You've changed. You don't come around anymore. You're too serious now. What they're really saying is, you're no longer accessible to my distractions. And this is where most people break. Because isolation feels like failure until you understand what it really is. Isolation is focus with boundaries. It's not loneliness. It's intentional separation so growth can happen without interference. Every winner goes through this phase. Every single one. Because you cannot build a new version of yourself while constantly feeding the old one. Now listen carefully. The lonely season is not permanent, but it is necessary. It's the season where you stop explaining, stop announcing, stop proving. You just work, quietly, consistently, without witnesses. Most people can't handle this. They need noise, they need validation, they need feedback, so they abandon the process early and return to comfort. Winners don't. They understand that progress is often invisible before it's undeniable. Now let's talk about identity. When you focus on you, your old identity starts to dissolve. The version of you people are used to begins to disappear. That makes others uncomfortable, because people like predictability. They like knowing how you'll respond, what role you play, where you fit. Growth disrupts that, so resistance shows up, not because you're wrong, but because you're evolving. Now here's a hard truth. Some people are only comfortable with you as long as you stay small. Not intentionally, but subconsciously. Your growth reminds them of what they're avoiding. So they pull, they distract, they criticize. You must learn to recognize this without resentment. Not everyone who leaves is an enemy. Some are simply incompatible with the next version of you, and that's okay. Now let's talk about silence again. In the lonely season, silence becomes your ally. You stop reacting, you stop defending, you stop arguing, you let your actions do the talking. This silence is not weakness, it's discipline. And discipline compounds faster in silence. Now pause. Think about how often you break your own focus just to feel connected, just to feel included. That impulse is human, but it's also expensive. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, you delay the win. Now let me say this clearly. You don't need to isolate forever. You need to isolate until you're strong enough not to be pulled backward. Isolation is not avoidance. It's training. It's where you build habits without interference. It's where you sharpen your standards. It's where you learn who you are without noise. Now imagine this. Months from now, you return to the same environments, same people, same conversations, but you're different. Not louder, not defensive, just solid. You don't need approval. You don't need to explain. Your results speak. And suddenly, the loneliness makes sense. Now understand this. If everyone understands you while you're building, you're probably not building anything new. Growth is often misunderstood in real time, but respected in hindsight. Now let's prepare you for the next phase, because after isolation comes something else. Momentum. And momentum changes everything. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when your effort finally starts paying off, and why many people self-sabotage right before winning. This is the danger zone, and knowing it exists might save you. Chapter 5. When momentum begins. There is a dangerous moment that almost no one talks about. It comes right before you win, not at the beginning, not when things are clearly hard, but when things start working, when discipline begins to pay off, when focus sharpens, when progress becomes visible, even if only to you. This is where many people lose everything, not because they fail, but because they relax too early. Momentum feels like relief, and relief is seductive. You think, yeah, finally, it's working. I can slow down now. I've earned a break. And slowly, without noticing, standards soften. Focus slips, habits loosen, discipline negotiates, and what took months to build begins to decay, quietly. Now listen carefully. Momentum is not permission to rest. Momentum is a responsibility to protect what you've built, because momentum is fragile. It doesn't collapse dramatically, it erodes. One skipped day, one distracted week, one "I'll get back to it tomorrow." Winners understand this. They don't confuse progress with completion. They know that consistency is most important when things feel easier. Now here's the truth. Early struggle trains effort. Momentum trains discipline. When everything is hard, effort keeps you going. When things start working, discipline keeps you sharp. This is where identity matters. Are you someone who works only when desperate, or someone who works because it's who they are? Now let's talk about validation. As momentum builds, people notice. They ask questions, they show interest, they compliment. This is another trap, because validation feels like arrival. But validation is not victory, it's noise. And if you start working for validation, focus breaks. You explain instead of execute. You perform instead of progress. You share instead of stack wins. Winners stay quiet longer than feels comfortable. They let results mature. They don't harvest too early. Now think about this. Fruit picked too soon looks impressive, but tastes hollow. Real winners wait until results are undeniable. Now here's something critical. Momentum magnifies habits. Good habits accelerate progress. Bad habits sabotage it faster. That's why this phase requires tighter discipline, not looser. More structure, more routine, more focus, not less. Now pause. Think about times you've started doing well, then slipped. It wasn't bad luck. It was a shift in standards. Standards protect momentum, emotion doesn't. Now let me give you a rule that winners live by. Never change your habits just because results improved. Change habits only to improve results further. Now imagine yourself here. You're focused. You're disciplined. You're building quietly. Momentum is forming. This is not the time to look around. This is the time to double down. Because what you're building is fragile until it's permanent. And permanence takes time. In the next chapter, we'll talk about pain. Not suffering. Pain. The kind that doesn't go away. The kind you must learn to use. Because pain is either a weight that slows you or a fuel that sharpens you. And winners know how to use it. Chapter 6. Turning pain into power. Pain is unavoidable. Discomfort, doubt, fatigue. Setbacks that don't announce themselves. They just arrive. The difference between winners and everyone else is not who feels pain. It's what they do with it. Most people treat pain as a signal to stop. Winners treat pain as information. Pain tells you where growth is happening. It tells you which habits are being challenged, which identities are breaking, which limits are dissolving. And instead of running from it, winners lean in, carefully, deliberately. Now listen closely. There are two kinds of pain. Pain that weakens you and pain that refines you. Weakening pain comes from chaos, from inconsistency, from regret, from knowing you didn't give your best. Refining pain comes from effort, from discipline, from staying when it's uncomfortable, from doing what most people won't. You choose which pain you live with. Either way, you pay. Now let's talk about emotional pain, loneliness, self-doubt, feeling unseen. This pain shows up when you focus on you, because you're no longer numbing yourself with distraction. You're present, and presence exposes everything. But here's the truth most people never learn. Emotional pain fades when it's used, when you turn it into action. When you say, "I will not waste this feeling." Winners don't wait to feel better. They move through the pain. They work while uncomfortable. They train while uncertain. They continue while doubting. And that builds resilience. Resilience is not toughness, it's familiarity. You've been here before. You survived. You kept going. So the pain loses power. Now let's talk about physical pain, fatigue, resistance, the body wanting comfort. This pain is a teacher. It shows you where discipline ends and excuses begin. Winners don't push blindly. They push intelligently. They listen, but they don't obey weakness. They rest strategically. They recover with intention. But they don't quit because something feels hard. Now here's something important. Pain often peaks right before adaptation. That moment when you want to stop is often the moment your system is about to level up. Most people stop there, not because they had to, but because they didn't know this. Now you do. Now pause. Think about pain you've avoided, conversations you didn't have, habits you didn't commit to, work you delayed. That pain didn't disappear. It turned into regret. Regret is pain without purpose. Winners refuse that trade. They choose pain with direction. Now let me say this clearly. Pain is not your enemy. Avoidance is. When you stop avoiding pain, it stops controlling you. It becomes chapter of the process, and processes create results. In the next chapter, we'll talk about patience, not passive patience, strategic patience, the patience that allows you to stay locked in long enough for the win to become inevitable. This is where most people quit. Not because they can't continue, but because they want it now. And winning, never comes on demand. Chapter 7. The power of patience. Patience is not waiting. Patience is staying locked in while nothing seems to change. Most people misunderstand patience. They think it means sitting still, hoping things work out. That's not patience. That's avoidance dressed up as optimism. Real patience is active. It's showing up again, without feedback. It's doing the work again, without recognition. It's believing in the process even when progress is invisible. And this is where most people fail, not because they lack talent, but because they demand proof too early. Now listen carefully. Winning does not respond to urgency. It responds to consistency over time. You cannot rush growth. You cannot negotiate with time. You cannot compress mastery into motivation. Everything meaningful takes longer than you want and shorter than you fear, if you stay committed. Most people quit in the waiting. They interpret silence as failure. They interpret slow progress as it's not working. And they abandon the very thing that was about to change everything. Winners don't do this. They understand a truth that sounds simple, but is hard to live. Results lag behind effort. Always. There is a delay, a gap, a season where effort goes in, but nothing comes out. This delay is not punishment, it's protection. It filters out the impatient. Now think about this. If results were immediate, everyone would succeed. But they're not. So most people leave early. That's the advantage. Patience reduces competition. Now let's talk about emotional patience. Emotional patience means allowing yourself to feel doubt without acting on it. To feel frustration without changing direction. To feel tired without quitting. You don't need to feel confident every day. You need to stay consistent every day. Confidence is a result, not a requirement. Now let's talk about trust. Patience is trust extended over time. Trust in your habits, trust in your standards, trust in the process you committed to. Every day you stay consistent, that trust deepens. And deep trust removes anxiety, because you no longer question whether it's working. You know it is, even if you can't see it yet. Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, do I quit because something is wrong, or because I'm uncomfortable not knowing when the reward is coming? That question separates winners from everyone else. Now here's the paradox. The moment you stop watching the clock, time starts working for you. When you stop asking, how long until I win, and start asking, what do I do today? Momentum becomes inevitable. Now imagine this. Months from now, you look back, and the thing you were worried about solved itself through consistency. Not through stress, not through forcing, through patience. That's how most wins actually happen. Quietly, gradually, then suddenly. In the next chapter, we'll talk about identity. Because at a certain point, winning is no longer about effort. It's about who you believe you are. And once identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. This is where things become permanent. Chapter 8. Becoming the person who wins. There is a moment when effort stops feeling forced. Not because things are easy, but because you have changed. At first, discipline feels like something you do. Later, it becomes something you are. This is the identity shift, and it's the most important moment in the entire journey. Before this shift, you rely on motivation. After it, behavior becomes automatic. Before this shift, quitting feels tempting. After it, quitting feels unnatural. Winning becomes less about pushing, and more about maintaining who you've become. Now listen carefully. Identity always wins against willpower. You can force yourself for a while, but eventually you return to who you believe you are. That's why temporary change feels exhausting, and permanent change feels calm. Winners don't wake up every day asking if they should work. They wake up knowing this is what they do. Now think about how you describe yourself internally. Do you say, I'm trying to be disciplined, or I'm a disciplined person? That language matters, because your brain follows identity. When you say I'm trying, you leave the door open to failure. When you say, this is who I am, behavior aligns automatically. Now let's talk about self-image. If you still see yourself as someone who starts and stops, you will start and stop. If you see yourself as someone who finishes, you will finish. Winning is not a future event. It's a present identity. Now here's the truth. Identity is built through evidence. Every day you show up, you vote for the person you're becoming. Every disciplined action is proof. Every kept promise strengthens identity. You don't need to convince yourself with affirmations. You convince yourself with actions. Now pause. Look at the actions you've taken recently. Those actions are telling you who you are becoming. And here's the good news. Identity can be rewritten. One day at a time. One decision at a time. Now let's talk about temptation. Temptation never disappears, but its power fades as identity solidifies. What once felt difficult becomes irrelevant. Not because you're stronger, but because it no longer fits who you are. Now imagine this. You no longer debate discipline. You no longer negotiate with distractions. You simply move. Because this is who you are now. This is the level where winning becomes inevitable. Not dramatic, not emotional. Inevitable. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something crucial. How to stay focused when success finally arrives. Because winning doesn't end the journey, it changes it. And many people lose themselves right after they get what they wanted. Knowing this ahead of time protects you. This is how winners stay winners. Chapter 9. When success arrives. Success does not announce itself the way failure does. Failure is loud, embarrassing, immediate. Success is quiet at first. It slips in unnoticed. A small win. A subtle shift, a moment where something works that used to feel impossible. And this is where many people lose themselves, because success introduces a new challenge. Comfort. Comfort whispers, you can relax now. You've earned this. You don't need to be as strict. And comfort is more dangerous than struggle. Struggle sharpens you, comfort dulls you. Now listen carefully. Success does not change who you are. It reveals who you became on the way there. If you built discipline, success amplifies it. If you relied on motivation, success dissolves it. If you chased validation, success inflates ego. If you built identity, success stabilizes you. This is why some people fall a chapter right after winning. They didn't change internally. They just reached a milestone. And milestones are not destinations. They are checkpoints. Now let's talk about attention. When success arrives, attention follows. People ask questions. They want advice. They want proximity. This feels rewarding, but attention is distracting, and distraction at this level is expensive. Winners learn to protect focus even more when success shows up, not less. They don't expand energy outward too fast. They consolidate first. They ask, what made this work? What must remain non-negotiable? What habits cannot change, because success is fragile if it's not reinforced. Now here's the key truth. The habits that got you here are the habits that keep you here. Changing them too early resets the process. Now pause. Imagine reaching the life you've been working toward. The schedule, the freedom, the respect. Now ask yourself, will the version of me I am becoming be able to sustain that life? That question matters more than ambition. Now let's talk about humility. Real winners remain humble. Not because they doubt themselves, but because they respect the process. They remember how fragile progress once was. They don't tempt fate by abandoning structure. They stay disciplined even when they don't have to. That's the difference. Now listen carefully. Winning is not about arriving. It's about remaining aligned. Aligned with discipline, aligned with focus, aligned with identity. If alignment breaks, success fades. If alignment holds, success compounds. Now imagine this. You don't celebrate prematurely. You don't announce everything. You let success settle. You keep working, and one day you look around and realize this isn't a phase. It's your life now. That's real winning. In the next chapter, we bring everything together. Not motivation, not tactics, but a final, internal agreement. The one that decides whether you drift again or stay locked in for good. This is the closing moment. Chapter 10. The Final Agreement. There comes a moment when everything gets quiet. Not because the world stops, but because you stop drifting. This is the moment where excuses no longer sound convincing, where distractions no longer feel harmless, where half-effort no longer satisfies you. This is the moment where you make a final agreement with yourself. Not emotional, not dramatic, permanent. Most people live without agreements. They live on moods, on bursts of motivation, on temporary resolve. That's why their progress resets every few months. Winners don't live like that. They decide once, and then they live according to that decision. Now listen carefully. This agreement is not about perfection. It's about direction. It's the decision that no matter how you feel, no matter how slow it seems, no matter how quiet the results are, you don't quit, you don't drift, you don't betray yourself. Because at some point, quitting becomes a habit, and so does staying. You choose which habit you build. Now let's be honest. You already know what you need to do. The routines you've been avoiding, the discipline you've been delaying, the focus you've been postponing. This audiobook didn't give you new information. It gave you clarity, and clarity demands responsibility. Once you see clearly, you can't pretend anymore. You can't say, "I didn't know. I wasn't ready. I needed more time." Time has already been given. Now it's about execution. Now think about this. What would your life look like if you stopped negotiating with yourself? If when it was time to work, you worked. If when it was time to rest, you rested. If when it was time to focus, you focused. No drama, no debate, just action. That life is quieter, but stronger. Now here's the agreement winners make. They don't promise to feel good. They promise to show up. They don't promise motivation. They promise consistency. They don't promise speed. They promise direction. And direction, over time, always wins. Now pause. Imagine the version of you who kept going when no one was watching, who stayed disciplined when it got boring, who didn't announce progress, who didn't chase validation. That version of you exists. And the gap between who you are and who you want to be is closed by this agreement. Now understand this. Life will test you again. Distractions will return. Doubt will resurface. Comfort will tempt you. But when you have an agreement, not a goal, you don't renegotiate. You act. And acting consistently turns intention into identity. In the final chapter, we end this audiobook the right way. Not with hype, but with truth. A truth you'll carry with you when this ends. Because the real work starts after the last word is spoken. Chapter 11. You are going to win. Let this be the last thing you hear. Winning is not a moment. It's a direction you refuse to abandon. You don't win because everything goes your way. You win because you stay focused when it doesn't. You win because you kept showing up when no one cared. Because you stayed disciplined when motivation left. Because you protected your focus when distraction was easier. That's real winning. Now listen carefully. You don't need to be extraordinary. You need to be consistent. Extraordinary results are built by ordinary actions done without interruption. Most people wait for confidence. Winners build it. Most people wait to feel ready. Winners move anyway. Most people stop when it gets uncomfortable. Winners understand discomfort is the price of change. Now pause. Think about who you were before this audiobook. More distracted, more patient with excuses, more forgiving of inconsistency. That version of you did the best they could, but this version knows better. And knowing better requires acting better. Now here's the truth that stays with you. You don't need permission to focus on you. You don't need approval to commit. You don't need applause to keep going. You need discipline. You need patience. You need direction. And you already have all three. Now imagine this. Months from now, you look back and realize you didn't quit this time. You didn't drift. You didn't restart again. You stayed. And because you stayed, you won. Not overnight, not loudly, but permanently. If this audiobook resonated with you, lock it in. Like this. not for the algorithm, but as a promise to yourself that you won't abandon your focus again. Leave a comment with the line that hit hardest, the one you'll remember when it gets difficult. Subscribe, not for motivation, but for alignment, for consistency, for staying sharp. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's capable but distracted. I'll leave you with one final line. Carry it with you. Focus on you until you win. And don't stop when it gets quiet. Tell me what audiobook you want next.